Unified on court, but a different attitude among the crowd.
These are for girls only. Remind me of your gender again.
The Queensland Suns all-boys team, the new under-18 state champions, beating Bond University's Bull Sharks, an all-female side.
One of my former teammates, Matt Geyer, his daughter actually played against that male team. They had no chance. Like the males were just like too fast, too physical. It was just a disadvantage to the girls.
Everyone should have the right to participate in any sport they choose, and it doesn't matter what your gender is.
There is no boys tournament due to low player numbers, so the team was placed in the girls competition.
This was just an opportunity and a platform for the men and boys to continue to grow and love and explore and experience our game.
We just want to create a space where boys can play netball and sort of change that landscape.
Referring to a statement by the Netball Queensland CEO, Catherine Clark, I'll put it up on the screen for people. She said that we stand by the decision to choose inclusion over exclusion. Let's judge the decision in 12 months' time and see how many boys and men's team we have, because if we can't, you can't be it if you you can't see it if you can't be it. Now, I've no issue if there's a male competition, but why would you have a state competition that's predominantly always been women and suddenly bring the blokes in and have the blokes win the grand final 30 goals to the women's team? That doesn't seem fair to me.
No, when we watch women's sports, we want to see the best women and girls that the world has to offer. We don't want to see men and boys taking up space on the netball court or on the podium. And frankly, I'd like to say to these boys, they should have forfeited. I mean, if they wanted to play netball, they should have done what women and girls have always historically done over the years and decades and centuries of fighting for equality, for access to sporting opportunities. And we've gotten out there, we've done the recruiting, we've done the fundraising, we've built our own leagues. And here you have these boys going, oh, I want to be included, so I'm just going to jump on in with the women, and I don't care about their right to fair competition, don't care about their right to safety. I'm just going to play. So yet again, we're seeing male entitlement, a lovely example of it here from Netball Australia.
Here we go. We're here. Hi, Kat.
Hi, Kat. How you going?
Not too bad. Now, it's a Sunday afternoon, so I'm just going to let the viewers know that the kids have got a cubby house underneath Kat's desk. So we'll see people going past and hear giggles and laughter at various times.
Yeah, got a house full of kids post nippers this morning, so everyone's running around screaming if there's noise in the background. So
no, it's okay.
I know, normal life.
So I came across a video in September, about 23rd of September. They had the All-States Championships, and Netball Queensland CEO Catherine Clark had decided that she would have the boys play in the state championships, and they totally blitzed it. And the parents were upset, and they were screaming at them. I understand some of them were. And there was a bit of a hoo-ha. I noticed on Twitter account they even asked the Queensland Netball asked, did we make a wrong move? And pretty much everybody said, yes, we did. But I had a look and I noticed in YouTube there was a number of Americans who decided to comment on what's going on in Australia. I won't go into it, but what I noticed very much was that there was three types of comments. There was comments like, oh yeah, you've got equality now, you don't like it, kind of thing. I'm giving it an Australian accent to these Americans, sorry. And, and this idea that this is all inclusion, this is what you've got to come up for. And at the same time agreeing that, boys are going to be far more stronger, faster, etc., longer reach, etc. How stupid of you. But I thought they were missing something on our side and what was going on. So I've got some questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Good. All right. So firstly, the chief executive, can I read some of the things she said? And actually, let me just share screen so you can see her face after this decision of hers, by the way. I'll let you know that 1 month or so later, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
1 month or so later, what happened is that she's moved over to Paralympics.
Okay.
So she's no longer in the Queen's for netball.
So she's thrown the bomb and walked away.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. So she stood by her decision, even said girls benefit from playing against boys as it pushes both males and females to improve their games. They, the boys, are really desperate to play it, and I think they played beautiful netball, as did all the other girls' teams. So firstly, I did a bit more homework on her. I don't want to do all the talking, but I did more homework on her. And the reason why she did that is because she saw the Silver Ferns were playing New Zealand men's teams. And up to a point, New Zealand Silver Ferns have been winning against the New Zealand men's teams, Aotearoa men and New Zealand men's. But you'll notice that the margin is really, really tight.
Mm.
But you've got one of the world's best. It's either Australia or New Zealand at the top of the net leagues, pretty much, I think. I suck at sports, but generally what I notice is either New Zealand's top or the Australia's top, right? So you've got the world's best women's team who's got a strict amateur team. But even so, they're pretty close, but it's rapidly changing because they just won recently, you know.
Mm.
And the wins have been tight anyway. But on the basis of that, she's used that as an excuse. Let's put the boys against it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I would suspect that these boys and men would have picked up the netball 6 months ago. I mean, girls often sell at 6 years old. So they are playing against their mediocre men in terms of their playing skills who are playing for fun and recreation against the world's best women. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And I really resent this Catherine person. Catherine seems to be a popular name in Australia, doesn't it? There's three of us here.
Yes, Catherine.
For saying, you know, the girls want to play against the boys. Now, look, my two little girls who play soccer, on a Monday, they have their soccer academy where they do play against boys. And yes, I do get that it brings up their skill set and so on. But it's one thing for them to do it in training. It's a completely different thing to be doing it on the field in a competitive environment. And I think Catherine choosing to just have a whole boys team, entirely boys up against the girls, without even considering maybe we do mixed sex or whatever, is completely disingenuous. I mean, she's just ignoring the fact that these boys have a biological advantage, significant biological advantage. And the fact that they, you know, just came in and they cleaned up. And I have no doubt that the girls who lost to them have been playing from a young age. I mean, those boys really made a mockery of women's sports. And I do stand by my position that they should not have played in that competition. They should have played a mixed competition. They should have waited to the next year. They should have found another boys team. I'm not going to back down off that. It was not the right thing to do. This was the women's competition. And netball was founded as an alternative to basketball because basketball wasn't ladylike enough. So, of course, the women go off. We go and make our own thing. We become very successful with it. And then suddenly Netball Australia in 2021 decides that it's a good idea to let the men in. Without any sort of, a quality assessment or let's actually look at the data here or look at their the biological advantage. I think it was very short-sighted. I think it was just to get woke cookies and virtue signalling and try to look, inclusive and diverse.
Well, here's the thing that struck me is that Stephen Kerr was on the Sky News snippet that you were on and 7 News, and he was saying it's all about giving everybody a place and it's about inclusion for all. But I thought it was a bit disingenuous because he runs he's the head of the president of the Suns team that won. Mm-hmm. And he's the one who's the driver of boys netball in Queensland and mixed sports. But here's the thing, when I heard mixed sports, because I know nothing about sports, I just thought it was boys playing against girls. No. Do you want to see the rules?
Show us the rules.
Sometimes it pays not to know anything, so hold on a tick.
Yeah, I mean, look, by its very nature, sport is exclusionary, particularly at the elite levels. Like, we're not just going to include everyone because they want to play. It's just ridiculous.
All right, just here, there's a whole bunch of them, I'll put links on it, but mixed netball can be fast-paced, action-playing game with men and women pitted against each other on court. To ensure all teams are evenly matched, there are restrictions on the number of male players on court at one time. At any one time, only 2 males minimum and 3 males maximum allowed on the court.
There you go.
So what does that imply?
Oh, it looks like they acknowledge their biological differences and safety risks. So, you know, and I mean, further to that, there might be some girls who just don't want to be playing a collision and contact sport with boys. Same with the men. Say, for instance, my littlest one, she plays rugby, and we have seen the opposite team be told by their coach to go a bit easy because there are girls on the other team, meaning my daughter and the other little girls. And while I very much appreciate that, I also think that as the boys get older, they probably just want to be as rough as they want to be, and they will start dividing up by sex, and that is absolutely fine, because probably at that point, my daughter, who's the biggest and the fastest at the moment, the boys will surpass her. And it's perfectly okay for people, for purely social reasons, to want to have single-sex competitions.
So I think one of the commenters, I'm not going to make comment on him, but one of the commenters is saying it was unfair to criticise the boys, that they should have forfeited. Okay. And his reasoning is because, you know, they were invited and they played hard, so why should they give up the opportunity?
Because it's not fair. It's inherently not fair. And the fact that they had an all-boys team pitted against all the girls, and that they really thrashed them, it was pretty obvious. I mean, it's a pretty Pyrrhic victory, guys. You know, I mean, really, you won the women's competition. I mean, well done. You know, is that something to really celebrate? You know, I think if those boys at all care about women, they should have said, no, we need to be playing a boys team, or we'll wait till next year, instead of going in there and taking all the glory. And I mean, frankly, you know, the way they were leaping around as if they'd actually won something, when really they just thrashed the girls, you know, it wasn't a great look.
Yeah, it was interesting. I felt that the president of the Suns was a bit disingenuous, because he was basically saying we choose inclusion over exclusion, and, you know, we want to make clear there's a place for everyone in our sport. When he's running a mixed sport and men's only netball. So he's already set the precedent,
right,
that they recognise the advantage of males over females, and then they put an all-male, not 3 maximum,
yeah,
not 2 mixed. I mean, I would understand if they, at the sport, they made a special event and had a mixed team one side, mixed team on the other.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And also the other thing I had an issue with is just saying, oh, well, having the boys there pushes the girls. Da, da, da.
No, they can do that in training. That is not okay in the middle of a grand final where everyone is playing hard, because we know that men are faster, bigger, stronger. We know that girls are more likely to suffer more severe concussions at lower impacts. I mean, we know that boys, you know, they've got longer strides, they've got longer reach, bigger hands. Like, it's just, fellas, we can't compete with that. And, you know, I mean, if we're going to get that ridiculous argument where you say, oh, well, there's some women bigger than some men, it's like, yes, there is overlap. But when you look, the biggest woman is never going to be bigger than the biggest man. And when you look at elite level, like we know, for instance, in rugby, the biggest, like Peter Tatchell was going on about the women rugby players. So I'd like to tell you, Peter, that the biggest rugby players for women are only as big as an average male player. Yeah. So it's just not comparative. You know, fine, as you said, you've got men's, you've got mixed. Why aren't the boys, and now the boys want to be in the women's too? So they've got 3 options. I mean, that guy running men's netball in Queensland, like, why couldn't he rustle up another men's team? Why couldn't they have gotten a couple of boys from the basketball team? I mean, the rules aren't that different, because it's like a watered-down version of basketball. I mean, that was the intent in the beginning.
Yeah, it's grown 80,000 players now of boys and men in netball in Australia.
So the fact they couldn't find boys?
Why? Yeah, so there was a couple other things that people...
What a joke.
I think the other major issue I have with this, one, I've got to say that Now this is maybe someone has said recently that I could be a bit paranoid. But one of the things that I noticed with all this talk about inclusion was so much important, we choose inclusion over exclusion. I've heard that before, coming from when they are arguing for boys who identify as girls and wanting them in the changing rooms, the toilets, and in on the sports ground. I've heard that before with when they've joined up with Pride in Sport, which actually these guys are part of Pride in Sport. They joined up in July before September match.
What a coincidence.
Isn't that interesting? So they're using that argument not for boys who identify as girls, but they're using that argument for boys only. In fact, when I looked at the rule book, what I noticed is that they took girls out altogether and they're just talking all genders. All genders have a right to play in the sport.
So what, all stereotypes have a right to play in sport? I mean, what does gender even mean? Is it even defined? It's certainly not defined in our legislation. So it's basically, this is what annoys me. I mean, the fact that, this Sky News segment sort of got picked up by other people and, wasn't happy with that interview, certainly wasn't happy with the COVID here. But the fact that you've got all these bureaucrats pretending that we're so inclusive and diverse and look at us and pats on the back and now we get to buy a table at Pride in Sport Index Awards at the end of the year. But at the same time, they're completely destroying women's sports and they're not admitting it. They're pretending that...
But here's the thing. In this case, and as I've seen this happen in other areas, for example, in universities, what they've noticed is they first push for having an all-gender toilet, single-sex toilets and all-gender toilets, so that, people who identify as women, etc., or vice versa, could go to the all-genders toilets and be safe. Right? But now they're pushing, screw that, we just want all gender toilets, male and females in the one space, which is no, okay? But what I wonder with this is, they're using the arguments of justifying trans women into sports, but they're just, screw that, it's just, this is the argument to have boys in sports, period. Isn't it?
Is this really, Is this really about being safe in the toilets, though? I think it's more about validation. And as we've seen playing out in volleyball in my area, there are men now competing in the women's who aren't trans. They're just men. Yeah, and they're going into the toilets and the change rooms before the game and they are loitering. So you're getting the women having to get changed in the car or having to show up already dressed, making things inconvenient for them because that space has been set aside for women. And you've got these men who are just getting off on being able to transgress boundaries, and now we can't say anything. Now, I think...
but it's not just that, but you're talking about individual men, but we're talking about a whole organisation that just say, oh, fuck it. All genders, everyone can go wherever they want, which is all men can go wherever they want. Let's just fuck it. I mean, they've taken away any pretense that it is about, transgenders and like that. It's just like, no, fuck it. It's just boys can go wherever they want, isn't it?
So what am I supposed to tell my 3 little girls? I'm going to go into the change rooms at the pool. Oh, there's a man standing there with his entire tackle out. Oh, just avert your eyes. Don't perv on him. Don't make him feel uncomfortable, just like at Wee Spa. Is this where we're at? I mean, or women who are going through, the years of childbirth where all sorts of weird things happen, or aging where, our bodies, do things that we have no control over, and only other women can understand that. And the fact that there are even men in these spaces, it is... Sorry, they are just transgressing our boundaries. And the fact that there are these organisations, they are failing fundamental safeguarding principles. We know the easiest and the least expensive way to keep women and children safe, because in Australia, 95% of sex offenders are men. They're male. The best way to keep them safe is to keep all men out of spaces where we're vulnerable, asleep, undressed, etc. So the fact that we're just pretending, we're playing Rex Landy's, phrase, willful pretend, and pretending that all of a sudden we've solved these problems is just extraordinary. Yeah. And what's it going to take? Is it going to take more girls being attacked? Because you've got this whole debate.
Well, sorry. Didn't you go and visit the sports minister? Am I correct in remembering that when you asked the question, what would it take? to stop this, he basically said we need to have a woman die in sports.
Yeah, this was in, I had a meeting with a bureaucrat from the New South Wales Minister for Sports Office last year. And look, I don't think it was said maliciously at all, but I think it was a bit of an off-the-cuff comment at the end of the meeting. And it was sort of like, you've got a bit of a battle on your hands, and it probably will take, until a woman is dead for there to be the political will to deal with this. Because obviously until, like we're standing here ringing the bell, saying the warnings, but until people actually see this, the mums and dads see the men coming into the toilets, or the boys dominating their daughters' teams, or a young girl who's going to be our martyr as a poster child in a wheelchair on ventilation or dead. And even then, I mean, we've seen these women get absolutely thrashed in MMA. That hasn't stopped them.
Doesn't make a difference. Choking doesn't make a difference.
No. We've seen the men up there. We've seen the Veronica Ivies and the Laurel Hubbards. We've seen how ludicrous it looks, because these guys are at least 25 to 30% bigger than everyone else in the field. And everyone's still standing there going, oh, brave and stunning, let's be inclusive.
Don't you think that a lot of this might have to do with making money? Isn't this really about making money? Because one, Netball Queensland, I don't think Netball Australia is as successful as New Zealand has in getting netball up there on the viewer coverage.
Okay.
On New Zealand, I remember reading is that the one of the channels really made a decision that they would actively promote the sports. I mean, the conversations were around that people didn't want to watch women's sports because they weren't good as men. But it begs the question, because when you've got heavyweight sports, when you got, say, boxing, heavyweight, featherweight, middleweight, everybody's interested still in the featherweight and the middleweight. We're sort of interested in their class. So one thing I noticed about all the trolls on YouTube is that it seemed like I was going way back to the 70s, where we're again working out what does the word equality mean and what does the word discrimination mean.
Yeah.
My understanding of discrimination is that when you have two things that are the same and you treat them differently, and equality is when you've got two different things and you treat them fairly. How's that as a definition?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So if you've got, an 8-year-old and you bring an 18-year-old as in a competition against that 8-year-old, that's not fair, because those are two different things. If you've got a black man, I don't want to touch on race, but got a black man and a white man, and they're both equally skilled and qualify for a sport, but you say the black can't play because he's black. That's not, the sameness with criteria missing is those criteria that matter. And in this case, you've got two different things. You've got female bodies against male bodies, which they recognise. It's disingenuous to not recognise that if they're playing mixed sports, they accommodate it, and then suddenly they bring it together. So I felt that was the major thing that everyone seemed to miss. They didn't seem to understand what equality is. And it wasn't an equal situation. From what I understand, is netball girls did a lot of work to get the money together to have what they've got. And how much money it goes into men's sports entirely.
Oh, I know.
Well, I looked at in terms of media coverage, and I think it's changed, but it was for most of the decades, it's been less than 4% of coverage on women's sports. Can women earn a living if they go into professional sports? Most women, if they go into professional sport, is there a pathway for women in professional sports in terms of earnings? Because I looked at how much the earnings were, unless you're really, really exceptional, like those tennis women champions. And I'm sorry, but I'm stuck at sports, so I can't remember. I like books, and when I was growing up, not sports. Books is what I wanted. But there's only an exception who could retire. Most professional women, they're not paid enough to keep playing professionally their sport, but certainly men are.
Oh yeah.
So it kind of makes me angry when they're talking about, these boys don't have a pathway, blah blah blah. Well, they do. There are pathways. I mean, they could go into basketball, but certainly I'm sure they are going to get more money poured into their sports as opposed if they were female.
Yeah,
making sense in what I'm saying. I just think that it's stupid to say this is it's stupid to say to mock women, which they were doing, saying, "Hey, you got equality now, and you don't like it." It's again with the Australian accent for the Americans.
Yeah.
You got equality now, you don't like it, something like that.
But it's not, that's a really simplistic interpretation.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's why it appealed to so many, because it was simplistic and they didn't have to think too hard,
because look, I mean, when we talk about equality, we talk about equality of access to resources, equality of opportunity. Don't agree with equality of outcome. That's just a losing argument. But equality of opportunity, absolutely. And, we can do that while still acknowledging the differences between the sexes. And, this argument that, women's sport is not that popular. Well, I call bullshit on that, because I think it's the American soccer female champions who are playing up at Newcastle, and the stadium is sold out.
Yeah.
My daughter went with her soccer coach to Homebush yesterday to watch the Matildas play. It's been the biggest crowd all year.
Yeah.
When the American women's soccer team were playing in the World Cup, the uptake on cable over there to watch those matches was the biggest it's ever been.
Yeah.
So when it's promoted and supported properly, it dominates. The biggest sport over in America. Oh dear. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the importance of sports for girls. Okay. Can I share something?
Sure.
Because last year, Kelly J. Keane talked to Coach Linda Blade. And to be honest, I've never heard anything like this said before. It was just a real eye-opener for me. So Kelly J. Keane said, "What do you think is the impact will be on girls if they do put boys and men in women's sports?" And this is what she said. "One word or phrase is called learned helplessness. This is an actual phenomenon. If you put human beings and experimentally in situations where they're constantly under stress and frustrated and they see everything's unfair, they will learn helplessness in the sense that they will be unable to even take advantage of future opportunities that they see where they could take an advantage of. They'll feel like they have no control. And one of the things that happens psychologically if you go through this, and I think little girls are going to be gaslighted into that state by having boys in their sports, it actually negates all the advantages, the psychological, the character advantages that are acquired in sport. In the sense that we know there's so much data out there that if little girls and teenagers and females all throughout life, if they can engage in sport, they can learn discipline. They learn self-control. They learn to be assertive. They learn to fight. They learn how to lose properly. They learn how to say, I didn't win this time, I'm going to win the next time. They, something like unbelievable number of 95% of something of C-suite executives, females who have become CEOs of major international, transnational corporations, multinationals, they've all had sports in their background.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not a fluke. She's amazing. I love her.
She is. She's outstanding, Coach Linda Blade. Yes.
Yeah. And you've neutralised that if you put boys in sport. I wanted to talk to you because at the sum it up, I think it's total bullshit what they did.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that they had the languaging that they used from Pride in the Sport to justify all this is just totally disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that it was just kind of like a theft. It was like stealing, wasn't it?
That's what it felt like. Yeah, and sometimes I wonder, pretty cynical by nature, I guess, being a trained lawyer and all of it, but sometimes I wonder if they do it for the spectacle. Yeah. You think of when they have stuck the men in there, whether they're trans or just regular men, they've gotten worldwide coverage. So sometimes I do wonder if they do have that that motivation.
It's good publicity.
Yep.
But I kind of actually, I was thinking about just to finish this up, I was thinking, Was it fair to be harsh on the boys for participating? You know, because Catherine Clark allowed them in, they were pushed by their president, blah, blah, blah. I kind of think it is, because if I was playing the sport and suddenly they put me in the over 80s or something like, we'll compare age, I said, no, fuck this, I'm not doing that, that's just cruel, I'm not. Or if I was abled and was put to play against disabled, I said, no, it's unfair.
No, you'd only say this is okay maybe if you're short on numbers, we mixed it up.
Yeah.
You know, and said, well, we'll have a couple of able-bodied players and the rest can be, you know, whether they're vision impaired or whatever it might be. But no, I think, I agree with you. Very disingenuous. And I think that the fact that the boys took it and ran with it, like, I'm sorry. I mean,
They gloried in it. Look at their faces and they're cheering and things like that. And look at all the men who are watching. They all laughed for them and said, like, you won one over them. And they all, and it was really interesting. They all called us feminists, everyone feminists for just wanting fair play.
Oh, I know. I mean, I think at one point I just...
What the hell is a woke feminism? How can you...
That was when they were criticising that, and I had people saying, oh, well, you know, if they were identifying as girls, you wouldn't have a problem with it. And I just went, really? You don't, I mean... Just ignore my entire body of work. I mean, obviously, a lot of the men who made those types of comments are just happy to punch down on women and have a laugh at women's expense. Yeah. You know, and netball have gifted them that, you know. And what annoyed me about that whole thing was that, you know, I am just a working mum sitting here with my 3 daughters, fighting for them, getting all the messages from everyone around Australia supporting me and the world. Yeah. And, you know, I'm out there and then we've got these bureaucrats sitting there clapping themselves on the back going, oh, yeah, we're being so inclusive and getting away with it. And the person, you know, myself or whether it's for Edge in New Zealand or Beth Stelzer or Coach Blade, standing up and pointing out that the Emperor has no clothes on, and we're the ones getting fired at and we're the ones sitting here talking the truth. Yeah. So, you know, to the Catherine Clarksons and, you know, what's his name? Catherine Clark. Yep.
Demoiselle, well, something stupid.
Yeah. The Robert Dalton.
Fellows. Demoiselles of Fellows.
Yeah, and another accusation was, you know, this is what the feminists fought for. And I'm like, you know what, yes. Yeah, I mean, there are women who are obviously pushing this through. But there's also, you know, Robert Dalton at Sport Australia. I mean, there's Kate Jenkins at the AHRC. There's, you know, our sports ministers. I don't think sex really comes into it necessarily.
I really
Yeah.
You know, I'm suspicious given that she got this big up on paraplegics from Queensland to paraplegics. It's Clark, whether or not they had, that's wrong of me to suggest it. But you wonder, you know? You just sold out all those girls.
Yeah.
And you knew that they couldn't be playing against because you've been playing enough mixed sports and the rest of us see it. So you just sold them out.
Yeah, and pretended it was all okay and pretended using that rubbish woke language, you know, equality, diversity, inclusion, as we all know, pretty much means the opposite. Yeah. And then tells the girls, no, this is what we're doing. We have to be kind. We have to be seen to be, you know, doing all these lovely things, all these lovely principled things. When in practicality, it's not that at all.
Did they at any time, I was looking on Facebook to see if they had interviewed anyone. I looked on Instagram. I noticed on the Sun's Instagram, they didn't actually put anything about that win, which was interesting. They put all their wins and all their successes, but that win, a major win, they didn't put up on Instagram. Their Facebook is down.
Oh, God.
Their Twitter, when they asked the questions, did we fail? Everyone said yes.
Yeah, I think...
It's all so much bullshit.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I wanted to talk about.